long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot.
Chapter 24. I sat scrubbing my arms, rubbing salve into the skin. It was not the first bath that I'd taken since everything happened on the World of Trust. The first two baths had been, the whole body trying to rub this solution in to take out the darkness. But I didn't see too much with that, so the next three had been focused on my core and my face, trying to get those more important parts clean, and that had definitely made a difference. At this point, I sat in the tub. I was wearing my clothes, but my sleeves and my pant legs were rolled up as far as I could get them, and I just rubbed and rubbed and rubbed to try to get my body to be normal again. And I could feel that it was working. The darkness was dissipating. There was still some latent strength and healing, but even that was diminishing. Which, I would have loved to have that, but I did not want other things that might come with that. I felt it was safer to just get rid of it all. Plus, I worried that if I left it too long, I just might never get to be the same again. And so I scrubbed and pulled out a piece of crystal as it scraped against my skin and flicked it into the trash. Some of the red and purple ISO that was in the solution wasn't as fine as the rest of it, so I flicked a number of them into the trash cans, building a small pile there, and just sat on the edge of the bathtub as I scrubbed away and thought, which was the hard part. We lost so many people. 30 of the Ceremans were gone, and not including Darren. And it just hurt to think that had been caused. And since then I had not been on speaking terms with Destiny. I had sired long enough to get the recipe for the solution that would help take this away. But since then I hadn't talked with him. And I wasn't going to. I couldn't trust him. And so I was alone. And just lost in my thoughts. Until there was a knock at the door. And I told them to come in, and Andrew walked in and said, Andrew, how'd you get here? Who brought you over? Because Darren was gone and Scar was with the salvage teams looking for him. And he said, I came myself. I did it. And I said, you did? No. You got through? And he said, yeah. And he sat down on the lip of the bathtub facing opposite direction of me, his feet out into the rest of the bathroom. And he pulled out the gate that I'd given him, a little feather sealed in resin. And he looked at it as if it were gold. And he said, yeah. And I said, wait, when did you get through? And he said, well, 2 days ago I almost got it, and I've just been doing that all day, every day since. He said, just after breakfast, I managed to get through to Saramea, and I just went back and forth until I knew I could do it on command. And I said, congratulations. He had been trying to travel for months at this point. And yeah, lately I knew he was gonna make it. It was just a matter of when. So that was a nice little break from all of this stuff that was going on. But he said, what's going on, and why is your hair black? And I said, well, interacted with an ancient force of evil and freed a Teletubby from its grasp, but it filled me with darkness. So I've just been trying to scrub the evil out ever since. I said, that is probably the craziest thing I've heard today. I said, where's Scar? Like, you mentioned she's off. And I explained to him the mission to trust and how that had gone. And that left even Andrew quiet. He said, I'm sorry. I said, it is what it is. I'm gonna go help the salvage crews too. I promised to help her look for Darren. And I do want to find him. I had forgiven Darren for everything, even though there wasn't as much to forgive him for as I felt that there was. I did want to see him back, but I just had to make sure that I was, getting this residue off of me first. And yeah, so he said, well, I'm willing to join you if it's not going to be too boring. I said, well, I'd be glad to have you along. I figured I'd gotten about as much done as I was going to be able to, and so I turned on the faucet and rinsed off my arms and my legs. Got some of the oil off using some soap, and then I drained the bathtub. I knew this was not going to be the last time I'd spent the entire day bathing, because, I was worried about the latent effects that thing might have. But after that was done, I rolled down my pant legs and put on some socks, and I said, all right. And we stopped by my rooms for just a minute so I could grab a coat, and went down to the laundry room where they were working on my scabbard. My suit was... I'd kind of given up on that. And my mobile, we were just going to have to get a new one. But my scabbard was not going to be easily replaced. When I came down, though, I was so surprised. They'd done such a good job. It was basically the same color that it was before. And yeah. And so I put that on, and Andrew and I headed out, leaving the ornate marble and dark woods of the Keltis, which still were so beautiful and still caught me off guard sometimes. Just like the way the purple ISO underlit the natural lighting that came through the windows, and it was beautiful. But anyway, we walked across the city, which was alive and doing well. The Ceremaeans had figured out life, and there were marketplaces, and people were getting more diverse and starting real lives for themselves. The Scanorans were out too, now that it was colder and closer to their normal climate. They were out and about in normal part of the city. It was kind of sad to see that the trees didn't have any leaves anymore, but there was a kind of beauty to the slumbering foliage. But we made our way to the traveling platform and waited there for a little bit as we were sending Profithians through from the world of trust. So many of the homes had been destroyed, almost a third of them, through the city. And yeah, we'd come to send the people through because they lost a lot of what they'd had anyways. And they were a sorry lot. Almost everyone was wet. And in the cold air, that was not easy. We were bringing them through just long enough to send them through to the world of becoming. And our forces working through the city were telling them to bring everything that they could. After we'd send all the Profithians through, we would gather up all of the food and supplies and send those through to the world of becoming. The last thing we wanted was for the Profithians to be low on supplies and to, in desperation, send people back or whatever. So we waited for them to finish sending a batch through, and then Andrew and I stepped up and went through to the world of trust, which was a lot warmer. Still dim. I don't know if they had a daytime. There was still fog all through the air and red lights through the forest. though those lights now reflected on silvery streets that still rippled with the flotsam that drifted through the city. We made our way down and as close into the center as we could. We used Andrew's mobile because his was working, and we all had tracking devices on each other, and so we were able to find where Scar was. It still took a while for us to get to her, and in the meantime we walked through the silent city. There were clothes and food and scrolls and materials strewn through the city, all unusable at this point, and it was an apocalypse. Every now and again we saw a body bobbing in the water, and it was hard to go through a reminder, and all too soon, of what had happened. But eventually we made our way along and saw Scar coming out of a squat wooden house. And she looked exhausted, which made sense. I don't think she'd slept since any of that had happened. Her hair was done up in a messy bun, and some of the hair was plastered against her face. She was still dirty, and I'm sure she was still cold from being in the water. She didn't have her jacket, and her t-shirt was torn through. And without her jacket, Scar looked smaller, more vulnerable. And it was just hard to see her like that. And you could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She walked up and she said, black's not your color. She rubbed her hand through my hair and pulled me into a hug. I just held her. I said, I know Andrew said it looked good, but I said, how's the search coming? She breathed deeply and she said, Fuller and I have searched 8 streets so far, but there are at least 200 in the city. She said, I don't know how we're going to do this. And I knew what she meant. We had Ceremanes going through the city. We started on the outsides, waiting for the water to drop down, soak into the ground, waiting to go into the middle of the city, which was lower down. But finding Darren was a different matter, and we wanted that done as quickly as possible. And as we sat there for a minute, another figure came out of one of the buildings. A tall woman, dark hair, wearing a simple light blouse and simple trousers, standard Ceremonian dress. Her hair was done up like Scar's, but her eyes were red from crying. And I kind of recognized her. And I said, who is that? And Scar said, that's Fuller, Darren's girlfriend. I said, what? His girlfriend? She said, gee, you are so blind. Who do you think was taking so close care of him even after he was fully healed? I'd been kind of busy. There was a lot of other stuff, but I said, wait, what? And I said, even still, what? I couldn't imagine Darren having a girlfriend, even though, he was still fairly young, but... And as she walked up, Scar filled me in a little bit that they had liked each other since long before Nightfall, and just hadn't acted on it until recently, until Darren had moved back to Demayas Cry. She walked up and I extended a hand and I said, Fuller, it's good to actually meet you. I'm sorry about everything that's going on. And she kind of shrugged. She said, the better we can get Darren back, the safer we'll all be. And that was true. We needed Darren. And she said, Destiny hasn't told you where he is yet, has he? And I said, no, Destiny and I aren't really on speaking terms at this point. And she looked confused at that. The Ceremanes didn't quite understand how Destiny worked. And she said, but couldn't you just tell you? And Scar came in, thankfully, and explained that with all of the Seers still in the city and with the Red ISO, it was going to be hard. And Andrew said, well, but the Seers are being evacuated, right? And there can't be many nearby. And I said, well, yeah, but there's still the ISO. And Fuller said, but would it hurt to try? And I didn't have a response for her. How could I explain the betrayal that I felt? That Destiny had done terrible things through me before. I'd gotten past those. But all of that came crashing down in a moment when he killed thousands. And I couldn't just open myself up to him again. But the pleading in Fuller's eyes and Scar's exhaustion and my own desire to see Darren again. It would have been so easy, but it could cost so much. I finally resolved to sire, to find out where he was. Not for me, not for Destiny, but for Darren. For these people who needed him. I closed my eyes, and I opened myself to Destiny, enough to find where Darren was, to memorize the place, and then I cut myself off again. I couldn't keep doing this. All the same, I knew where he was. I said, he's across the city. Scar, take Fuller. I can take Andrew. And I pulled the broom out of my scabbard, which could hold 2 people. Not well, but it could do it. And Scar took Fuller in her arms, and we took off over the water that filled the center of the city. And as we came near, I pointed out the place and landed down. Scar and Fuller were inside the building before I landed in the water that still filled this place. There was at least 6 inches of it left, which made me worry how much there was earlier on. Andrew and I went into the building, and we turned into the side room where Darren half sat, half knelt in the water. His clothes were soaked through and his hair was still damp, and he was unconscious, bound his arms to the ceiling, and red ISO crystal, torturous. As we got near, I could feel it warping my mind, and some of it was bound to his head. Scar pulled out her lightsaber and slashed the crystals that were hanging up above and cut straight through his bonds. He dropped down to the ground, and Fuller caught him there, pulling out a knife to cut the crystals that were bound to his head. And Scar pulled him into her arms, and she said, I'm getting back. Meet me at the Cultus as soon as you can. And with that, she raced out of the building and shot off into the darkness. End of chapter 24.